to our home buyer webinar. We have a great group of panelists, guest speakers tonight that are going to talk about every step of the home buying process. Tonight we have Mr. Alex LaPolla from Movement Mortgage. We have Mr. Rick Lima from Lapointe Insurance, Mario and Fonseca from Mario Fonseca Home Inspections, and Arthur Russo from Hobson, Coutu, and Russo. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I am Christina Maysh. I am the team leader of the Maysh Real Estate Team at Revolve Real Estate. We are a boutique agency that services Massachusetts and Rhode Island for all your home buying and selling needs. Thank you guys so much for joining us. First step in the process is, as we get going in our home buying process, is number one, getting your pre-approval, having an understanding of what you can purchase and for how much. And so for all of that, all of your mortgage needs, we're going to go to Mr. Alex LaPolla from Movement Mortgage. Alex, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. So like Christina said, I'm a loan officer with Movement Mortgage. It's the #1 lender in Rhode Island and one of the top in Massachusetts as well. I've been in mortgages since about 2016. And as Christina said, my name's Alex, and we can pick it up from here. And I can get started and talk about a little bit of what goes in the financial side and a little bit about the loan process and just a little bit of a general idea of how mortgages work and a little bit of extra information that you might not find elsewhere. So yeah, happy to get things started.
All right.
So first thing I'm going to get into is why it's more beneficial to buy and own a home than it is to rent a home. So there's several advantages. I have a few of them highlighted here. The first is that owning a home can always be a wise investment. The reason that is because homes tend to appreciate in value, meaning the value tends to increase rather than go down. So you might be able to buy a house today for X amount of dollars, and then in 10, 15 years or whatever it might be, sell it and make a little bit of money on the side as well. And on top of that, if you own a home, you're building up the ownership interest, otherwise known as equity. Now, equity can be used a lot of different ways. You can take equity out through a cash out loan. What that means is you would be doing a refinance and taking out the cash out of the equity from the home. And you could use that for additions to the home or to go on some sort of vacation that you were planning or to start a college fund or anything like that, really. As well, on top of that, the interest paid on a mortgage is usually tax deductible. Now, that's something you'd have to talk with a tax advisor about to get the specifics. But when the time comes for around tax time at the end of the year, it's always something to include. And, it can either increase your refund or decrease the amount of money that you owe at the end of the year. On top of that, if it's your home, you own it, so you have the ability to personalize it in any way you want. I'm sure everybody on this call, me included, has one point lived in an apartment. Obviously, if you live in an apartment, you own it. So the landlord's going to have certain rules and set, whether it's, you can only hang things on the wall with certain fixtures, or, you can't, you can only use certain types of appliances, or, you have to use a specific type of paint or anything like that. But if you own the home, you can do whatever you want. You can go crazy. I mean, you can paint the walls pink or blue or red or orange or whatever, whatever you want to do, whatever you're into. And that's one of the best things. One of the reasons that people like owning homes, because it's theirs, they can do whatever they want. On top of that, if you have a little bit of extra room in the house, say you have a room that you're using as an office for now, or a yoga studio or a gym or something like that, down the line, if you have a growing family, you can convert that into a nursery or a spare bedroom or an in-law or anything like that as well. And just going over kind of what I talked about as well earlier, a starter home is a great way to build personal wealth through the increase in value over the home and through the ability to potentially get a cash out refinance. And you would be paying your own mortgages instead of paying someone else's, which is what you are doing when you're renting. So now I'm just going to get into why it's more beneficial to buy now than it is to wait. So everyone knows the housing market's crazy right now, and that homes are selling for record amounts. I'm sure everybody's seen it. I'm sure they've been told that by family and friends. I'm sure they've seen it in the news and online and everywhere. So why would you buy now? Obviously, if everything is selling for as high as it is. Those are two words that are important: appreciation and inflation. So nationally, economists believe that we will see an inflation rate of roughly 2.5% this year. Now that's due to the country opening back up, and that's due to supply chains resuming normal function post-COVID, whereas they were diminished and a little bit working a little bit less and a little bit slower than they normally do. So once we see that inflation, what's going to happen with interest rates? Well, interest rates are going to go up as well. And I think it's kind of what we're starting to see now, because rates are higher now than where they were a year ago in the very beginning of COVID. So as a result of that inflation, the experts are calling for interest rates to go up over the spring and summer. And however, inflation is usually temporary. So I think what we're going to see is you're going to see rates come back down as well. And that's something that the major forecasters in finance and mortgage are going to say is happening too. So you should probably wait to buy a home until then, right? Until the interest rates are lower. Well, I think that's wrong. And I think it's wrong because you're forgetting about home appreciation. So home appreciation is expected to be around 7.4% this year. Now, what that means is that a house that you buy today is going to sell for at least around what they're calling for, around 7.4% more next year. Now, I know it's a ton of information. It's really wordy. So I made this graph to kind of illustrate what I'm saying. So if you take a look and you buy a house in spring of 2021 for $400,000, go with a regular conventional loan, 5% down payments, $20,000. Loan amount on that is $380,000. We'll estimate that the interest rate is 3.5%. The monthly principal and interest payment on that is $1,706.37. Now, let's assume that 7.4% inflation for next year, and we'll assume that the interest rates go down, which is what's being forecast. That same house is going to sell for $429,600. Down payment goes up as well to $21,480, as does the loan amount. Again, we'll assume interest rates drop 3.25%. The monthly principal and interest payment on that is $1,776.16. So it's about $70 more a month if you wait. Now, let's assume absolute best case scenario, that rates drop to record lows, to as low as they were at the beginning of COVID when everything was going crazy. Let's say the rate's 3%. And again, we'll assume the 7.4% inflation, and the down payment would be the $21,480, loan amount would be the $408,120. The monthly principal and interest payment on that would be $1,720.64. So what I'm getting at is that's still $15 more a month than what it would be today, even with a interest rate that's 0.5% lower. That's always something I like to bring up because I think it's something that doesn't get spoken about and something that's not presented in the proper way through people who are, either in the media or someone just looking from the outside in. So I think it's a very important point. So now I'm just going to get into the basics of home ownership. So before I do that, though, I do want to talk about appraisals and home inspections and the difference between the two. I'm not going to go too in detail on this because home inspections are Mario's field and he can get you a little more information with that. So I just have a little bit of a base level explanation of the two. So an appraisal is an unbiased professional opinion of the value of a home, whereas a home inspection is used to determine if there are any repairs needed on the home and what those repairs might cost. That's the difference between the two. A lot of people think, oh, why do I need to get a home inspection if I'm getting an appraisal? Well, that's the reason right there. Now, as far as appraisals go, there are different kinds of appraisals that are determined by the loan that you go with. So for example, if you end up moving forward with the FHA loan, which I'm going to get into a little bit later, the house has to appraise according to FHA regulations. An FHA appraiser is going to look for things like peeling paint. They're going to make sure that the railings are there and that the sinks are all functioning and the stoves are in place as well. Whereas if you go with just a conventional appraisal and a conventional loan, they're going to take a much more as-is approach to the home. Whereas they're just going to say, okay, this is what we think the house is valued at. This is what we're happy with. And if you're comfortable with buying the house, we're comfortable with it selling for that amount. And I can move on from here. So I'm just going to go over some of the factors of the pre-approval. Now, there's roughly 30 different factors that determine your pre-approval and that determine your interest rate. I get calls all the time, as you can imagine. And I'm sure you can imagine how many I was getting when rates were as low as they were. My credit is this. What's my interest rate going to be? Well, it's not that easy. I wish it was. If it was, it'd be a lot busier. But like I said, there's roughly 30 different things, and here are just a few of them. So some of the things that go into it, it's your credit history, your employment status, qualifying income, existing debts, down payments, that sort of thing. So really, well, I always tell people the key to achieving a good credit score is how much you have on credit, the payment history on those debts, and if they've been maxed out, whether it's a credit card, an auto loan, or anything like that, or if it's something that you're paying on time, or are they paying more than you need to. That's usually the best way to look at it. Okay, so, yep, so how much do we need for a down payment? It's a question I get all the time. So today, there's a lot of different loans with a lot of different down payment options. So it really depends. Some of them are really low. Some down payments are 3%, 3.5%, 5% minimums, and some are even zero down options. Of course, the amount you put down, it's going to impact what your mortgage payment is. It's going to impact what you qualify for, and it's going to impact the interest rate as well. But there are several options to fit your needs. We can move from here. Okay, so next I'm getting into what does my mortgage payment include? I'm going to get into what's included in your monthly payment and what you're paying. Now, before I get into it, I just want to bring up that I'm assuming here that you're opting to escrow your monthly payment. What that means is that you're opting to include your taxes and insurance in your monthly payment rather than pay them separately. That's usually the better way to go because it's easier and it's easier to track, as well as it's a lower interest rate. If someone decides they want to pay their taxes and their insurance on the side, then the interest rate's usually a little bit higher. So the four things that go into your monthly payment are your principal, your interest, your taxes, and your insurance. And as I said, that's assuming that you are escrowing, as well as if you're putting down less than 20%, you're going to have mortgage insurance as well. So I'm just going to get into a little bit of the different loan options and just a little bit about them. I'm not going to get too detailed. I don't want to bore anybody here. But the first thing I always talk about are conventional loans. So conventional loans are backed by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. That's something that a lot of people might be familiar for. You hear it on the news, you read it in the newspaper. So these conventional loans, they typically have lower debt to income ratios. What that means is they're a little bit harder to qualify and they have higher credit score requirements as well. Now you can get them with a lower credit score, but the interest rate is going to hurt a little bit more. Whereas the FHA or VA loans is not going to impact it as much. But if you have enough income and then low enough debt and high enough credit, or if we're putting down 20% or more, then the conventional loan is almost always the way to go. So next I'm going to get into the government and bond loans, and that's the FHA and VA loans that I touched on a little while ago, as well as the USDA loans and state bond programs. So the bond programs, they're used by city and local government to help fund down payments for people who wouldn't normally be able to afford a home without it. So that's where your zero down comes from. So Rhode Island Housing, for example, that's a bond program, and that's one of the zero down options. And then you also have VA loans. So the VA loans, they're backed by the Department of Veterans Affairs, obviously. They do not require a down payment, but they do have a funding fee, which is tagged onto your loan amount, which is something I always like to include. So now that you understand loan programs and what's available and a little bit about them, I'm going to take a look at the home buying process for you and the steps that you would want to go through. So these are the 6 steps, and I think this is universally the best way to go about it. So step 1, obviously, would be to complete the loan application, provide the income and asset documentation to get the pre-approval and get your pre-approval letter. Once you get that letter, you want to share it with your real estate agent. Of course, is going to be Christina Mayshel here hosting the event. From there, step 2, you want to go over that pre-approval letter with your real estate agent, with Christina, as I said, and discuss your purchase options, where you want to buy, or what you're comfortable paying, and what exactly you're looking for in your home. And then from there, you and your agent can formulate a plan to see those homes and fit your needs and your budget as well. Step 3, let's start your home shopping. That's the best part, right? So one thing I want to tell people right now, with the market being as crazy as it is, stay focused, don't get discouraged. It's going to take a little while, but it's going to be worth it in the end, I promise. Of course, you always want to stay in contact with your real estate agent. You always want to stay in contact with your lender as well. The last thing you want is to find a home that you love, go to put an offer in on it, call the lender and find out it's a little bit out of your price range, or find out that the monthly payment is way more than you thought it was. Because then you're going to be upset, and you're going to have to go home and explain that to whoever it might be. And of course, at the same time, you don't want to engage in any large spending or open up any accounts, or even apply for any accounts, I should say, too. So you found your home. Congratulations. Now what do we do? So step 4, you want to work with the real estate agent, decide what you want to offer on the home, what you think the home is worth, and what the real estate agent thinks you should place an offer for. Want to go over that offer with the lender and update your pre-approval letter as needed. Like kind of what I was saying earlier, make sure that you qualify for it and make sure that you're comfortable with that monthly payment. From there, you want to submit your offer with the earnest money deposit, which is just the cash deposit on the contract. And what that does, I'm sure Christina's going to talk about this, so I won't go too in depth. What that does, it lets the seller hold the property aside for you until you can present more information. From there, step 5, you want to get that appraisal ordered and you want to get property inspection scheduled as well. You give Mario a call, say, hey, we found this property, put an offer on it, offer got accepted. We want you to come in and inspect it. Everything makes sense. Mario's gonna say, awesome, congratulations. Let's pick a day and we'll get that going for you. And then of course, on my end, the loan is gonna go into underwriting. You're gonna have to get us, more documentation. If you're working with me, I'm gonna make it as easy and simple as possible and stress-free. As well as you're gonna need to acquire your homeowner's insurance, which you're gonna do through either Rick at LaPointe Insurance would be probably your best option, or, from there, you just want to get the loan to be submitted to final underwrite, as I went over a little bit earlier as well. And then you're going to receive your final loan approval. From there, you're going to go over the final closing statement. You're coordinate with the lender. You're also going to be in contact with the closing attorney and whoever is working in his office or her office, or Arthur, the paralegal there is Becky. I work with her all the time. She's great. Arthur's great as well. Probably two of the best that I've worked with and my time of doing this. Going to get everything squared away with them. You're going to attend closing, you're going to sign all the documents, and from there you're going to have keys to your home and you're going to have your own place, and from there you're going to be a homeowner. And that's pretty much it for me. The only other thing I want to add, just what I went over a little while ago, don't go with any large spending or open up any credit applications, and don't change jobs or at least call me and ask if it's going to be a problem first, and then we'll take it from there. Well, that's pretty much all I have. And thank you everybody for listening. And I'm going to pass it off to Christina here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. We appreciate it. Again, folks, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat. We are going to do a little Q&A at the very end of this webinar to answer any and all questions that you do have. But please do type those questions into the chat. It's a lot of information to digest, right? So we want to make sure that, number one, throughout this process, that you're getting your answers to all of your questions and that they're clearly conveyed to you. People can talk in, mortgage jargon or legal jargon or different things like that, and you don't quite understand it because you're not in that world all the time. So please do not hesitate to ask any follow-up questions about anything that we discuss. All right. So moving on here. Again, my name is Christina Maysh. I am the team leader from the Maysh Real Estate Team. We have an amazing team at Revolve Real Estate, and we service Rhode Island and Massachusetts. We do everything soup to nuts, from buying to selling. We work with any type of property, any type of price point that you can imagine. We do new construction, all sorts of different things. So we're happy to have you here, and I'm excited to connect with you. Next step in the process, you've got your pre-approval now, okay? So finding your home, that's where we really dive in deep as your real estate agent. First step, defining your price range, as we talked about with Alex, setting your pre-approval amount. But please understand that that might not be your comfort zone, okay? So just because Alex says that you are qualified to purchase a home up to $350,000, well, maybe that's really not your comfort zone. And it's really going to come down to the breakdown. And the thing that I love about Alex is that when he sends these pre-qualifications over to you, they're very detailed in terms of the breakdown of your down payment and what that needs to be. And he also will give you a snapshot based on different properties. So I could say to him, Alex, the client is looking at this property. Here's the purchase price. Can you give me a ballpark? And then that way, it breaks it down into reality, so to speak. What's the bottom line? What is my monthly payment really going to be? What are my closing costs really going to be? And how does it all play out? So When you get that type of feedback and that type of information, it helps you truly define, well, okay, I'm qualified up to 350, but I feel, comfortable only going about 325. And that way you're not overstretching yourself. You're not having that situation down the line saying, oh my God, what did I get myself into? You want to make sure that this is truly an exciting process for you at the end of the day. When you get those keys to your home, you want to be excited. You don't want to be crying 3 months down the line when you get your first mortgage payment and say, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Okay, so defining that price range, we go beyond just your pre-approval. I go back to Alex and connect with him and get that breakdown. Once we've figured that out, then we are going to define your search area, because you might have your heart set on specific towns. Well, those specific towns come with specific property values. Every town is different in what they're doing. So you might be able to get more bang for your buck in one town in comparison to another. So are you definitely going to be somebody who's shopping, has to find a home in Somerset, Massachusetts? Or can we expand that search to other towns that might get you, spread your money a little bit further? So that's something that we're going to look at, defining that area. Do you have a job that you need to be within a certain radius? Things like that. Family members, daycare, all sorts of things come into play when you're defining your search area. So we want to formulate a plan and see homes that are fitting those needs. Defining your must-haves. And this is something that people, when you work with buyers all the time, and they'll come to you and say, okay, here's my pre-approval. Now I want 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, 1,800 square feet home, and it needs to be on an acre lot or more. I want a garage or a 2-car garage. So we have to work in those things, but really try to identify what is realistic and what truly fits into the budget, what you're willing to negotiate on or let go, so to speak, and what are your sticking points. I have 2 children. I absolutely need a 3-bedroom home. There's no way I could get by without 3 bedrooms. Okay, great. So we try to define those criteria that are absolutes. We definitely need these things. And then we go broad on the rest of it, because if we whittle that search down to very specific items, you might miss a property that could be absolutely perfect for you, but because it doesn't have a garage, well, maybe it has space to build a garage in the future. And maybe it has the opportunity to renovate a basement and add more square footage to it. These are different things that we talk about when we're looking at the search. We don't want to narrow it so much that we're excluding everything out of your search. Okay. So you want to define that, those things that you aren't willing to negotiate on. And then we go from there. Right now, we are in a very hot market, right? So the inventory is so low. There are so many buyers out there. Alex is going crazy, writing pre-approvals for everybody, right? But there's not enough homes for all of Alex's buyers to purchase. So super competitive market. Defining your timeline. Some people will say, oh, I'm 1 to 3 months. I need to be in a new home. Some people might be 12 months from now. I still would not discourage the people who are 12 months on a 12-month timeline from starting their search now, because the market is so crazy. It might take you that long to find something. So making sure that you guys understand, as Alex said earlier, it's a competitive market. You have to be, stay the course and don't get discouraged. With that, we talk about contracts. Okay, so there's going to be a few different contracts, a few different documents that you're going to see throughout this process. I don't have all of the contracts. The worst is the closing. I'll let Arthur get to that later, but you better stretch your hands when you get to the closing table, because you're going to write your name more times than you care to count. But the first step in the contract process would be issuing an offer for a home. So you found a home that you like. Let's put an offer together. Okay. And so we're going to do that Like I said, competitive market right now, properties are going over ask. If they're priced appropriately, they are going over ask pretty much every single time. So when you're putting together an offer, you want to look at that. I am going to run a comp analysis for the property. We don't rely on the other agent to say, oh, well, this is the list price and I know exactly what the market's like. Sometimes they don't. They don't have a clue. Sometimes they're spot on. Sometimes they're going based off of the seller and the seller's wants. That seller is saying, oh, I have to get this for this. Oh, well, okay, we'll list it for that. But that's not necessarily market value. And sometimes they go well under market value because they're trying to drive more traffic into the home. So what we do is we run a comp analysis as your agents and kind of get an idea of what we feel like market value is for that home. And then we give you a window of, well, this is what we feel like market value is here, but I do feel like it could go as high as X. But again, this is where your comfort zone comes in. You need to be comfortable that you're getting everything that you want for what you're paying. Okay, so if I say to you, a home is worth $285,000, and you say, well, that's over what I'm comfortable with, well, then it's probably not the home for you. But if you say to me, I would be very disappointed if I lost this house. This is my dream home. I'd be so disappointed if I lost this house. And I bid 290 and they went 295 or something like that. So we can put together those purchase price amounts, so the offer amounts, based on what we feel like the market value is and what your comfort zone is. The next aspect of putting together a strong offer is the contingencies. And something that Mario will get into a little bit down the line, and Rick will also touch base on this a little bit down the line. Something that you're seeing a lot of people do is waive a home inspection contingency. That contingency is there for you to identify a problem that you might not have seen in, I feel like we're doing speed dating sometimes with these showings, right? You're in and out of a home in 10, 15 minutes. And how can you see everything in all of that? And then you have to put together an offer. So people are waiving home inspections. Well, how do you know that there's nothing wrong with that home in the 10, 15 minutes you ran through it? That's where Mario comes in, and he's looking at things that, I'm not a home inspector, nor am I a contractor or a plumber or an HVAC specialist. He's coming in to look at all of those things and identify potential problems with the home that you should investigate. But if you waive that home inspection and you find something wrong in the home, you cannot get out of the contract. So, it's up to everybody. We always put it on, it's always up to you as the buyer on what you want to do, what you feel comfortable with. Again, it's all about your comfort zone. But in terms of waiving a home inspection, I personally would not highly recommend that. There are other things that you can do. You can do a home inspection for informational purposes only, which means that you're not going to negotiate on the price for your home inspection. And there's other things as well that you can do in there. The next contingency that you're going to have is your mortgage contingency, your bank commitment contingency. So if you're not going through a lender, if you're not working with Alex and paying in cash, props to you, but you would waive that contingency. But when it is in there and you're not paying cash, you're going through Alex, you're going to have that bank commitment contingency, which means we set a date where the bank has to say, yes, we are committing to these buyers and we're approving their loan. We're going to be moving forward. If the bank does not do that, God forbid something happens with your employment or anything like that, you have that commitment date and that contingency to remove yourself from the contract and get your deposit back. Okay. Some other contingencies that really come into play right now are, there's lots of suitable housing clauses. Seller is, it's contingent on the seller finding their next home. So something to think about as you're going through this process is, are you renting something? Are you leasing something currently, moving into a new home? Do you have a home to sell? And does that have to sell and use the proceeds of that to then put down on your next purchase. So these are all different things, the timeline of things that can come into play and either strengthen or weaken your offer. The last thing I'm going to talk about is your earnest money deposit. Now, this is something that people sometimes will confuse or say, okay, what would you like to put down as your earnest money deposit? And they immediately think that it is their down payment on their mortgage. And that is not the case. The down payment on the mortgage is what you would be paying officially at the closing table. But your earnest money deposit is your commitment to your offer, to the contract until we get to the closing. So you're saying to that seller, I'm fully committed to this contract. I love this home. I want to get to this closing table. And I am going to show that by telling you that I'm putting X amount of dollars down on the contract that you can hold until we get to that closing table. Now, whatever you put down in an earnest money deposit is going to come off your final price at the closing table. Okay, so if you have 3.5%, say you have to put down $10,000 on your mortgage, then there's closing costs about $7,000. So let's say what you were supposed to pay at the closing table is $17,000. Okay. If you had put down an earnest money deposit with your offer and with your purchase and sales contract of $5,000, that would then be taken off of the top of the 17. So when you get to the closing table, now you only owe 12. Okay. So that's how that works. It is the money you give now, you don't have to give later. And anytime a contingency is to the point of you need to remove yourself from the contract because of the contingency, home inspection wasn't good, or you get denied on your loan commitment, then you would get that earnest money deposit back, as long as we're staying within the timeframes of those contingencies and we're notifying the other parties in the contract accordingly. Next step in the process, inspections. I'm not going to dive deep into this because Mario's going to hit that later. But the one thing that we do as your agents is we do the repair negotiation. So we go in, have a home inspection, and there's some things that have popped up on there that you either, one, want that seller to fix, or two, you would like a monetary concession to be able to fix that on your own. Okay, so sometimes what we'll do is we'll either reduce a purchase price based on this, or you can do what we call closing cost credits. Okay, so when you're putting together an offer, you can say, you can roll your closing costs into your mortgage. So if you want to purchase a home for $285,000, but you don't want to, you want to try to reduce your closing costs, the money out of your pocket at the closing table, you can ask for a closing cost credit of $5,000 or whatever amount you deem. You just cannot go over. And again, I'll let Alex hit this a little bit later. You cannot go over that amount. So we'll say $5,000. So what's happening is you're purchasing the home now for, instead of $285, $290. But you're getting, the seller is giving you $5,000 back at the closing table. You don't actually see the dollars, okay? They're not going to hand you a check and then you hand it back over. What it is Arthur will work the paperwork at the end, and you will have to pay $5,000 less out of your pocket at the closing table. And then those sellers are going to get $5,000 less out of their proceeds, okay? So that is a way we can negotiate repairs monetarily. But the other way, like I said, is submitting requests to the seller for them to fix certain items. And then once that's done, we move forward. The next step, like Alex was saying, appraisal. Again, some people get confused with this. Is it the home inspection or appraisal? No, the appraisal is for the lender, for us to get the value of the home, or what is deemed the value of the home. But with certain programs, they can be very strict. They need to make sure that the home is in good condition. There's not any issues. So FHA is one of the tighter ones. VA, same thing. Things like peeling paint and, rotted things or any type of water things like that, those are things that might come up on an FHA or a VA appraisal. And so those are what it is they'll say these things have to be fixed for us to, you know, green light this mortgage, for us to approve this mortgage. So we need to make sure that items like that are cleaned up. And again, this is where we negotiate with the listing agent and help you guys out through the process. I have been in situations where I'm out there with my clients in a paintbrush, painting chip paint on a garage. And because that's what we needed to do to make sure that the appraiser didn't raise a red flag at the appraisal time. Okay, so there's ways around these different things that we do with negotiations. Final step in the process here for us, the closing. Are you moving? Do you need movers? Setting up your utilities, all these different things, the final arrangements for the process. You know, for us, for our family at Revolve, the Maysh Real Estate Team, it's about building great relationships with you as a buyer and sellers as well. So we want to be there for every step of the process. We have lots and lots of contacts in all sorts of areas, whether it's moving companies, home decorators, contractors. Are you doing a renovation? Do you want to add a fence right away? All those different things. And we try to help you with every step of the process as you go through making those final arrangements, making sure your utilities are set up, that you understand what you need to come to the closing table with, and what goes on post-closing. And so post-closing there for us, again, is to continue that relationship with you as a buyer, as a seller, and check in with you, see what's going on. And again, continuing that process. I still get phone calls and text messages from previous buyers that, you know, we closed on properties and they were there for a year and something's going on. And so then I put them in touch with Rick because they need to make a claim for insurance or they need to do something else. So that's what we're here for. And it's not just from your pre-approval to the closing table. It's well beyond that. It's for life, and we look forward to it. So that's my spiel as your realtor. And again, if you guys have any questions about any step in that process of working with the realtor, please do send them in the chat, and I'm happy to answer them at the end. So our next, this is my lovely team here. Next individual is, we are going to talk to Mr. Mario Fonseca from Mario Fonseca Inspections. He is one of the best in the business as far as I'm concerned. He's very detailed and clear communication, helps the clients, and just very down to earth, easy to talk to. So Mario, we look forward to hearing from you here.
Thank you. Thank you. So a lot of people don't really know what to expect when they're getting into an inspection. They always ask me, oh, did the house pass or did it fail? And it's not really cut and dry like that. There's a lot that goes into a home inspection, and there's a lot of info that people get thrown at them in a short amount of time that needs to be kind of communicated easily and the right way. And that all comes into the report at the end. But a little bit about myself. I've been doing radon and lead inspections in Rhode Island for about 15 years. I've been doing home inspections with my father's company for probably even longer than that, 20 years or so. I'm on my own company now, so I've had a lot of background in this. You can go to the next slide, detailing some of the licenses that I have. I'm also an InterNACHI member. It's a home inspector organization. And I'm also licensed in pest control. So I've done a lot of different types of inspections, a lot of different types of things. And I just have I've had a lot of experience in this field for about the past 20 years or so. So basically, you heard before about people saying that they've been waiving inspections and things like that. I personally would never do that. I put an offer on a house myself not too long ago, and I refused to waive the inspection, even though I walked through the house myself. I don't think it's wise to be making one of the biggest purchases that you can make and go off a 10 to 15 minute showing or online pictures, things like that. There's a lot that you can't understand about a house until you really get your hands on it and try to understand what's going on inside the property. So when we go through the home inspection, it's not just about, oh, this is broken, this is broken, this is broken. It's also teaching you, okay, here's your main water shutoffs, here's what powers this. It shows you how all the systems in the house are connected together, how the house works. So that way, in a month or two down the road, you're not blindsided by something that you didn't anticipate. So like there was one I did not too long ago. It was a full crawl space house down near the beach. And I told them, you know, when it becomes wintertime, you got to go down that crawl space and plug in this electric wire to wrap your pipes so the pipes don't freeze. And he remembered that I said that, but he didn't remember where it was. So we had to talk. I had to talk him through it on FaceTime while he was crawling around in there the other day, a couple months ago, I should say. And that was a fun one. I actually returned to that house to show him some other stuff. So it doesn't always just end with the home inspection. A lot of times people reach out and ask questions afterwards, and we're always here for that. So on the next slide, basically, one of the first things I always do when I go into the house is I introduce myself and I find out who the buyer is, who the seller is, not the seller, but who the selling agent and all that stuff. But the first thing I like to do when I get in that house is get down in that basement and take a look at the electrical system and the heating system of the house. Because once we start going through everything in the property, you kind of want to know what you should at least be finding as you go through. So you take a look at those panels, you see how many big 220 electrical devices you might have. You see how many zones of heat are on the heating system, so you know how many thermostats you should be finding when you're going throughout the house. And you also take a look at the boiler and you say, okay, well, this is a forced hot air system. So then you go in another room and you see, you know, a baseboard, and you got to figure out why you have all these multiple systems working together in the house and go from point A to point B, essentially. You know, a lot of times you'll go down there and you'll look at the electrical system, and to regular home buyer, they look at the electrical panels and everything looks good. But there's a lot of times when you look in those electric panels, you see a lot of handyman work, or you see a lot of handyman work under kitchen sink where the homeowner's been doing their own repairs. And a lot of times those repairs aren't done properly. And if those are big surprises that you can find a little bit later on down the line. So there's also a lot of places in a house that you may never go to. Most attics are not your pull down attic or your walk up attic where you're going to store things. Most attics are little tiny spaces where you're never going to go up. You're never going to take a look in there. They're only going to be accessed when you need to do work or something needs to be repaired. And other times there's like a little crawl space in the house. Sometimes there's crawl spaces that people don't even know about. On this slide in particular, that bottom right picture, that's a picture from last week where there was just a sheet of plywood on the floor, and I lifted it up and there was a crawl space that no one knew existed. So we got down in there, we took a look at everything, and there was actually a very big crack in the foundation down there because there was a huge tree behind the house that was about 4 feet off that was causing some damage with the tree roots down there. But one thing that almost any homeowner never really does is go up into the attic if it's not for storage. A lot of times that's where problems can start, when your roof is starting to fail, or if there's condensation issues. If you look at that picture up there, you can see there's mold growing on the roof deck. Those are areas that most people just walking through a house would never take a look at when they're getting ready to put their offer in. So a home inspection is really a good opportunity to get in there, take a look at everything, assess what's going on, see what needs to be fixed and what you are able to handle. So there's your home inspection, which basically, for me personally, is we'll go through and we'll take a look at your house from top to bottom. We'll take a look at the roof, the attic, we'll test all the windows, plugs, plumbing, heating systems, all that stuff. But myself and almost every other inspector, they'll offer additional services as well. Things such as radon testing, mold testing. I personally, because I've been doing pest control for 20 years, I offer a free termite inspection with every home inspection that comes. There's no extra charge for that. But there's also lead testing that you can do, and well water quality if you have a house that has a well as opposed to city water. So things such as radon are things like a naturally occurring gas that comes from the environment that you can't smell, you can't taste, you can't you don't know if you have a high amount of radon. The only way you would ever be able to find something out about that is by having the property tested and putting a device down in the basement for, 48 to 96 hours to test the air and see how things are in that house. So there's your basic home inspections where you're getting just the mechanical systems tested, and then there's optional services as well, where you can really get in there and take a look at a lot of things in a house that you wouldn't typically get a chance to see just by looking at online listings or quick little simple walkthroughs. If there's other things such as a septic system or anything like that, a lot of times myself, I'll recommend a third-party contractor come out and take a look at a septic, because that's a very expensive part of your house. And if I'm not licensed in a particular field, I'm not going to tell you to be comfortable with something without having somebody who's trained in that field to take a look at it. So I know there are some home inspectors out there that'll lift the lid on the septic tank, and they'll take a look in there and they'll tell you, oh, it looks good or it looks bad. I can do that, but I'm not comfortable doing that for you. So I always recommend somebody as well to come and take a look at those systems, because there's a lot of times you'll see little tiny things come up in a home inspection. Well, this window doesn't stay up when you open and close. That's a relatively easy fix. But if the septic system fails a month after you buy the house, that's a giant red flag, and that's going to be more than $200 to fix. These are a couple of pictures here. A lot of times people like to buy 3-family, multifamily houses that have roofs that are inaccessible. You can't see them from the ground level. We also offer drone photography to take a look at some of the things. The picture on the left, you can see the actual plywood on the roof. That was a very flat section of roof that was not visible from the ground. So we got a drone up there a couple of days later, took a look at that, and that whole section of the roof needed to be replaced. You can see the shingles are completely gone. So there's a lot of optional things you can do. But it's not always things that are working versus not working. Sometimes you can have a system in your house that is seemingly working very well, but it could actually be dangerous for you and the people that are living there. So a lot of times you're seeing now people are really trying to maximize the space in their house with finishing the basement or things like that. And what they'll do is they'll take their combustion devices like their forced air, their hot water tanks, their dryers, and they'll put them in little tiny closets. And yes, you'll go and turn up the thermostat on these devices, and everything will be seemingly working properly, but you could be causing a safety hazard by having carbon monoxide gases being backdrafted into the house because something like that forced hot air furnace doesn't have enough combustion air. So we look for a lot of things throughout the course of the inspection, whether things that are, yes, your boiler is working, but you really should have some combustion air. Yes, your electrical system seemingly is working, but you have a Westinghouse panel and those breakers are known to have a high rate of failure. You should have an electrician come and take a look at this. That was something that actually happened last week. We did an inspection for somebody. It was actually about 2 weeks ago. We noticed that they had a Westinghouse panel. Those are known for their breakers to not be working properly. When you think that they're off, they're still energized. So people go to do work on certain things when they think the power is off and it's actually still on. So we did an inspection for somebody. We found a Westinghouse panel. They ended up getting an entirely new panel and a main service cable put in as a credit from the seller, because we found something like that. It wasn't safe, and an electrician confirmed that that was the case. So even though you might be a buyer that has bought multiple properties, there's always some things that you just can't anticipate as you go through the inspection. On this particular slide here, this was a house I inspected for somebody who has bought and sold dozens of properties. They make their living in real estate. They're a landlord. They have multiple properties still. They've bought and sold multiple properties. But we got up in that attic and we found out that this house had suffered a major fire. And this happened to be a $700,000 house down in Bonnet Shores. And if you drive by and take a look at that house now, it's not there anymore because they knocked it down after what we found in the inspection. So it's not always, even if you might be somebody who's very experienced in real estate and you're a contractor and you've flipped houses and you've renovated houses, but without enough time to really dive in and go throughout the whole property, it's tough to see a lot of the history as to what's going on. So another thing that I always, like I was saying before, I offer with every house is a free pest inspection. The picture on this slide here is of some termite shelter tubes that were growing along some of the wood in the basement. There's various different kinds of wood destroying organisms, and depending on what your loan is, you may need a special FHA form for your lender. And so a lot of times you'll see little markings on wood, and most people don't know the difference between carpenter ants and powder post beetles and termites. And that's where somebody like myself can go in and do a full pest inspection for you, identify what may be going on, and let you know if you need to have your house treated for termites. So basically, in my opinion, I would never waive a home inspection myself, even though I am a home inspector. I've taken a look at houses and we've thought about buying, but I wasn't comfortable myself waiving the home inspection because I knew I needed to get up in that attic to see if there was mold up there, things such as that. Even brand new construction houses can have little tiny things pop up. I've been on new construction houses where the ridge vent is already blowing off and needed to be repaired. And I say all this stuff not to scare anybody, because I've bought myself a foreclosure that needed everything to be repaired. So everything can be fixed. It's just a matter of knowing how much work needs to be done on your home, if there are any big ticket items that may crop up in the next few years or so, and if there's anything safe, anything a safety hazard wise that could be going on in the house. Those are things I tend to key in on the most, are the safety issues that you can encounter, because when you see things that everybody can kind of eyeball the siding of the house and say, oh, that's going to need a paint job in the next 5 years or so. But if we know that the electrical panel is a Westinghouse panel, or if it's a Federal Pacific panel, we know that those things are dangerous to buyers. If you see yellow flexible gas lines in the house, we know that those have been recalled, and that those, because they didn't have a proper bonding. So in my opinion, everything is fixable. It's just a matter of knowing what needs to be fixed and how to approach it the right way. And so you're not blindsided and burdened by things at the end of the day. So this is also a picture of a house that I did recently. This was a brand new construction house. And we ended up having to go there a couple of times. The first time it was supposed to be ready for inspection, and we got there and there was no outlets or power in the entire house. The second time we went there, we actually had power. So we did the radon test and it came back really, really high. So even on new construction houses, there are always issues to take a look at and get resolved. That way you can have some peace of mind when you buy the house and you're ready to close on it. So that's pretty much my whole spiel there. And once you're done with me, Christina moves you on to the next person in line when you're buying the property, and you can negotiate any issues that I've found and go forward and be comfortable with what you're buying.
Awesome, Mario. Thank you so much. We do have a couple really good questions. One good question from Lauren that we'll get to later, Lauren, at the Q&A, talking about home inspections and condo associations. So okay. We'll get that a little bit later, but we're gonna move on here to Mr. Insurance himself, Mr. Rick Lima, who works with Lapointe Insurance Agency. You might have seen him in his fancy videos on YouTube or social media. He is the man with the plan when it comes to insurance. He's great, easy to talk to, down to earth, like I said, and super quick to get back to you. And that's one thing that I really love about all these guys that I work with is they're always there for you in any moment that you need them. So I'll let Rick take it away here with his presentation.
Yeah, Rick Lima, LaPointe Insurance. Fancy, that's the first time I've heard that from one of my videos. So thank you, Christina. I appreciate that. We like to have fun here. We understand insurance, not the most exciting thing or exuberant thing, but it is super important. We try to have fun with it, working hand in hand with really everyone on the board here. As far as Alex up front, he needs the appraisal. That's big for Alex. For us, appraisal is not so much a huge deal. We're more concerned with, God forbid something happen, what's it going to cost to rebuild. So really, we try to do some, if you want to talk on the phone, we're going to talk on the phone. If you want to look at some videos, we made a couple quick videos that help to educate you on your new home. And we just try to make it fun. That's the big thing at LaPointe. Make it fun, work hand in hand with, everyone's a team. There's a lot of people that, it's like they're separate entities. It's like we should all be on the same page to get this person in their home, which is you guys, it's the first time home buyer. And, we really, I think at least the five of us here promote that. And yeah, so let's get down to business here with insurance. Everyone sit down in your seat. This is going to get crazy. So you're buying a home, biggest investment you'll ever make. My big thing is the least expensive policy can become your most expensive. So yeah, everyone's about the bottom line. And yes, it plays hand in hand into what you're paying monthly for your mortgage. Alex can, brief you on that. He's going to guess up front, a very educated guess, because he deals with a lot of homes. I mean, he's going to give you a pretty good guess up front as far as what's it going to be to get you, what your mortgage payment is going to be. But we never really know because your taxes, they're set in stone. Mortgage pretty much set in stone. And then the insurance is really the factor kind of where we at, so we can nail that down for you. And really, if you, God forbid, you have a financial disaster here, I mean, your home is your biggest investment you're probably ever going to have. So let's cover you properly. We give you a couple options. We go through the differences and we go from there. Just a couple, we go on for days about insurance, just like we could in any of these things, but the normal things you're going to see, am I covered? God forbid there's a fire. Am I covered for a storm? We can go right down to vandalism, smoke, glass breakage, falling objects, theft. This is all stuff on your basic home policy. There are bells and whistles which can enhance your policy, make it better for you. Everyone's different. Some things matter to some people, some things don't. So my big thing is really educating, communicating, which I feel like everyone on the board here is a big proponent of communicating with the client, making you guys know what you're covered for or what to expect. I can't emphasize enough how big it is to have a Mario in your corner, a home inspector ahead of time that knows what they're doing, because a lot of the questions you're answering for insurance would be answered in that home inspection. But if you waive it, we're taking a lot of guesses here. So a lot of the things he's concerned with are a lot of the things we're concerned with. And at that point, you could lean back on the insurance thing, like, hey, I didn't know about this in the inspection, but there is a pretty strict thing with wear and tear. It's not covered. So you want to make sure you know everything you can, gather all that info when you're about to get your house. So big things that aren't covered, could put wear and tear on here too, along with maintenance, but you might get lucky on those sometimes. But floods never covered on a home insurance policy. If you are in a high-risk flood zone, Alex and his team, they would let you know if you are in a high-risk flood zone, if you're required to get flood insurance. You also have the option to get flood insurance. 2020 was a crazy year. Things were happening that we've never seen before, probably including floods in non-flood zones. So just because you're not in a flood zone doesn't mean you can't get flood. Anywhere that it rains, you can get a flood. So you do have an option to get flood insurance if you're not in a flood zone. And it's much more inexpensive because you have a lower risk to get flooded. Earthquake, this is not normally covered. You can add this, contrary to popular belief, you can add this to a home policy. Sometimes the juice not worth the squeeze here because earthquake, you have a super high deductible. We're talking, depending on the value of your house, we're talking 20, 30 grand sometimes out of your pocket just to have coverage for this. So, sometimes that's maybe not worth it to you to have $200, $300 a year extra to cover earthquake. You got to pay that much up front. Acts of war, usually not a thing. Terrorism, things like that are usually not covered under your typical home insurance policy. Nuclear detonation, zombie apocalypse, the things that could happen that just aren't covered. So 8 things you should know. So I made this just for a first-time home buyer, 8 things you should know while you're looking at a property, what could affect your insurance. The address, the reason they could have a huge impact is how far are you from the coast? What's the year built on your home? You know, things like that are different characteristics that certain companies rule out. They're like, all right, we don't want anything built before 1900, and we don't want anything within 2 miles of the coast. Because 2 miles of the coast, you're more likely to get hit a lot harder with a hurricane than somebody that's inland would, because the hurricanes come off the coast. Closing dates, that's a big thing. Rates change, they're only good for so long. Alex, I'm sure you've experienced with us, you have a couple times where it might be in probate for a month or two, and you know it might not help substantially, but it might not be the exact rate we agreed to before. There's all different reasons your closing could get delayed, but not to scare you, like Mario was saying, we're not trying to scare you here, but you know, closing dates can change, and the quote's only good for a certain amount of days. So if it's pushed that far out, you know, we want to know an accurate date so we can get you the accurate premium that you're agreeing upon. Potential hazards, wood stove, usually not going to get charged extra for this. We're really looking at the setup, because with a wood stove, you're looking at more of a risk for fire. Obviously, you're lighting fires in the wood stove. So we're trying to figure out, is it non-combustible material around it? We don't want a wood stove that's sitting on a hardwood floor. Probably not the best combo. We want to have something under there that's, you know, not going to go up in flames. Because as much as we want to cover you insurance-wise, the bottom line is they're for-profit companies. They don't want to pay inevitable claims. And, you know, so we look at all the stuff up front. I do a lot of this without really talking to the buyer about it. I can kind of use the pictures online, which, once again, Mario mentioned, is a little scary to do. But with a wood stove, I can see the setup pretty much, you know, from that kind of stuff. Pool, once again, really not going to affect the rate a ton. More concerned with the safety, you know, with the wooden deck pools, for example, can somebody just come out of the screen door and just run into the pool? You know, that's the kind of stuff. They want to have a fence in front of it, make sure that a toddler can't run out, God forbid something happen, you know? So they're really, it's a safety inspection that we're kind of doing up front. Same thing with the koi fish pond and a trampoline. You know, if you're jumping around a trampoline, you're more likely to get injured. I used to have one myself, and not only, you know, usually it's, you know, kids jump around a trampoline can get hurt. Also, in a wind storm, a trampoline can get taken and go into the neighbor's yard and, God forbid, do something to their house. So that's a dual thing. And that being said, some companies will accept you with a trampoline. That's the advantage of a broker like us. An agent, we're looking around, we have 20 companies. Some do's and don'ts are not for everyone. So type of heating system. Companies always ask, do you have space heaters? Space heaters are more known in older multifamilies, you know, you see a lot around here, Fall River, Providence area, you'll see a lot of space heaters. Now companies are starting to come around to, if they're thermostatically controlled. So what they're really worried about is the old school space heater where you turn it on and you turn it off. And at least if it's thermostatically controlled, you can have one that goes off at a certain temperature, you know, so they're starting to work with us on those, but the old school space heaters are a concern because, once again, larger fire hazard. They like to avoid that. So that's something to look at. Pets. Oh, little Daisy, you know, she's your pride and joy. And, you know, she can have a bearing on this, depending on the breed of the dog. Some companies will write any dog. They might charge a little per dog, depending on the breed. As fair or unfair as it is the way it is for the most part. And there is a market for everything. So that being said, don't get completely scared. Out of our 20 markets, we might have, you know, 15 that'll entertain the pit bulls of the world, or, you know, the pups like that, which get a bad rep. But I personally, I'm a huge proponent of how you bring them up is how they're going to be raised. I know a lot of very friendly pit bulls too, and a Shih Tzu that'll bite your toes off. So, but it is the way it is. So I ask about it, and we do have some companies that'll actually kind of take, if you did like some safety training with the dog, you know, they'll take that into perspective, some of them. So I always have a combo. I figure that part out, and we do what's best for you here. Property updates is the big thing. We're going to look at the roof. I mean, that's a big thing for us. Like Mario said, if you can't get up on that roof and you get a drone picture of it, you know, that picture in his last slide, we're going to be pretty concerned with that, because as much as wear and tear could be an exclusion, we're still looking at the ability that we could be on the hook here as the company themselves. So I always put myself in not only the client's point of view, but I'm in the unique situation where I'm not the company, I'm actually the agent. So I put myself in the company's point of view too. We are contracted with them. We want to send them, business that's profitable as well. So I always have a kind of a convo with the client. I'm like, hey, are you planning on getting this roof done? I'm seeing some lifting shingles in the pictures. And if you're not, this might not be your best option. We might have a different one for you. We'll always have one, just a matter of what it is. So the preferred companies would prefer that you don't have any knob and tube wiring. You have some circuit breakers. That's another big one. In old school multifamilies, you'll see a lot of knob and tube, known to prone to cause fires. So, not that it will if you buy it, but that's something we look at too. Bundling with auto, I take it case by case. Not always a huge deal for us because we have so many companies. Some of our companies' appetites might not be the best as far as your best home might not be your best auto company. They might give you an agency discount for having it within the agency. So I go case by case on that. I don't see the point of overcomplicating your home buying process if we don't need to. If you're not going to save, $400 on your home by, comboing your auto, let's just look at it on renewal. I don't really see the point of rushing you around. Not a huge deal. So I guess that could fall into discounts too. Bundling's a discount possibly. Security system. So if you're going to get ADT, we'll have a certificate for that. We'll submit that to the company. It's not going to pay for your security system. So I know ADT and those companies might make it seem like they're going to pay for it, but it's really, if you're going to get it anyway, then let's give you a discount. It's not that you should get it because you're going to get the discount. It's not a huge game changer. Superior home construction. If the home's in solid shape, you're going to get a better rate. I mean, if the home's in solid shape, you're less likely to file a claim because it's in solid shape, and you're going to get a rate as such. So that's kind of how it goes. And safe home credit, pool, no dog. Yeah, things are less likely to happen in that case. So yeah, the 5 basic components of home insurance, not going to go crazy here. Dwelling, what it'll be to rebuild the home, which is different from that appraisal value. Appraisal, you're taking into account the market value, which right now the market's up here. So that appraisal value is going to be higher than it would have been 3 years ago. That's just an example, but we're concerned with the cost to rebuild. We'll work with Alex and his team to prove that even though your appraisal is 100 grand above what we're saying it is to rebuild, that it is sufficient coverage for your insurance. And they have no worries about getting paid back because we're going to be able to rebuild that house as is. So that's the big thing for us, communicating with everyone. Other structures, literally exactly like it sounds. It's the other structures that are on your premises. So fence, detached garage, a barn, anything like that, shed, anything, other structures would be 10% of the dwelling amount. So if you had a 300 grand home, we're guessing how much to rebuild, you'd have 30 grand for other structures. And occasionally in places like Barville, Pasco, where they might have a barn or two and maybe a larger one, will increase other structures. We can do that. But your typical other structures would be about 10% of your dwelling. Your personal properties, anything, I always use this example. Pretty much you took the roof off the house, you dump it upside down, anything that would fall out of the home, that's your personal property. So that's coverage, what they would call coverage C, your personal property. Anything you own within the home and within the other structures as well. If you had, lawnmower in there, stuff, that's all on your personal property. So that's something we want to ensure. And depending on which option we're going with, it'd be anywhere from 50% to 70% of your dwelling amount. So this is in addition to the dwelling, not total. So, it adds up rather than all being under that one dwelling limit. Loss of use, if God forbid something happened, you needed to live elsewhere. It's a covered claim. That's the big thing. It's a covered claim and you need to live elsewhere. Loss of use covers that for you. So that's to live somewhere comparable to where you are now. Liability, absolutely humongous. It really is. Nobody thinks of it for home insurance. Mortgage doesn't require you get a certain amount of it, but I always stress a ton of it. Any third party claim, it could be the obvious of somebody slipping and falling, at your house or somewhere to me, I see Alex's videos of him playing golf and doing trick shots. You know, I'm not half as good as Alex at that, but you know, if I hit a golf ball who plays once every 2 years and I hit a guy in the head, God forbid, and I got sued, that actually it's personal liability. That actually that would go into your home insurance. I know it's not something you normally think of, but that anything you get sued for, that term personal liability, literally we're insuring the person that owns the home. So anything pretty much besides auto, because auto would be covered in the auto insurance. Yeah, so I kind of get into this a little bit. Some more concrete examples of market value. So what you're buying the home for versus what we're insuring it for, which is replacement cost. So two extreme examples. One, you're buying a 3-family in Fall River and it's 4,000 square feet. And we're looking at, on our end, we're looking at 800 grand to rebuild this thing. And you're like, oh my God, I'm only buying it for 200,000. Why do I need to insure it for 8? The reason is we're going by what's it going to cost to rebuild this if something happened to it. You're going by, which understandably too, you know, common sense tells you I need to insure it for what I'm buying it for. That does make sense. But to kind of hammer it home, your market value, what you're buying it for, location, it might not be in the best location ever. It might not be in the best shape ever. You know, there's all different factors to the market value of it. And we're insuring it for what's it going to cost to rebuild. It's going to cost, you know, if you go like 175 per square foot, you're looking at about 800 grand now. So you're looking at a lot more than you are buying it for. Complete reverse, buying a beautiful home on the water in Narragansett. It might be 1,000 square feet. You're paying $1 million for that home. We might come in at 300 grand to rebuild because it's 1,000 square feet. It's not going to cost that much to rebuild. Why would I ever insure the home for $1 million if, God forbid, when something happens, it's only going to cost us 300 grand to rebuild it? You're paying for the water view. You know, you might be paying for the school system, you know, who knows? But there's a bunch of different factors. We're concerned with getting you back to where you were before the claim. So those are the big things. And that sums me up a bunch. You know, we take everything case by case. So any questions, give us a ring. We'll go through it with you. Anything from buying your first multifamily to maybe thinking about selling that and, you know, buying a single, and we can go over the different coverages for each and kind of go from there.
Awesome, Rick. Thank you so much. We had another question that we'll hit for you later about the difference between home warranties and home insurance. So we'll catch up with you a little bit later on that one. But thank you so much, Rick.
Thank you.
So last but not least, here we have Arthur Russo from Hobson, Coutu, and Russo. Arthur is the closing attorney, and he is the one who you get excited for because you walk into his office and you have to sign your name 3,000 times and hand him over a check for your down payment. But at the end of it all, you get your keys to your new house. So he is the fun moment of the process for sure. Arthur, welcome. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I've never been described as fun, but I'll try. So congratulations, everyone. You've made it to the end of the process. And if you could be here with me right now, you would be in my conference room, and I'm actually sitting at the closing table. So you are here at the closing table. Congratulations. We've had a very long seminar, so I'll try to make the law as fun as I possibly can, which is difficult. I certainly don't want to lose you guys. So my name is Arthur Russo, and I'm a partner at the law firm of Hobson, Coutu, and Russo. I am a Rhode Islander. I'm a graduate of Lincoln High School. I went to Providence College, graduated in '95, then on to Suffolk Law School, graduating in 1998. And fortunate for me, I have been at this firm for quite a long time. I have been here since 2001. They must like me. And I am admitted to practice in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts. So I can perform closings in both states. So just a little bit about our firm. Our firm has been in business since the early 1980s. Our primary focus is real estate conveyancing. So you're looking at about 40 years of real estate law. So there's not much here at Hobson, Coutu Russo that we haven't seen. There's something new every day, but for the most part, we've dealt with a lot of the matters that you would confront in this process. So just keep that in mind. So again, my primary area of practice is real estate transactions, but here at Hobson, Coutu, Russo, we also practice landlord-tenant matters, zoning and planning, and estate planning and probate. And that's somewhat of a little ad for my firm, but at the same time, you're dealing with a firm that has knowledge in all these little areas, and all those areas can sort of come up during the closing process. So, for example, you may be buying a multifamily in Fall River or in Providence. Well, you may have questions about landlord-tenant matters. I can answer those questions. I can be a resource both before the closing as well as after the closing. Same thing can be said for zoning and planning. We might be doing the title examination, or you might get a surveyor out there that says, gee, there might be an issue with zoning or my lot here, and I can advise you on that. And then finally, when it comes to estate planning and probate, there are certain matters that come up during the title examination process that involves estate matters and probate. And again, it's a field that I'm familiar with, or we're familiar with. So we can better help you understand, what's the holdup. I know someone earlier in the presentation, I think it was Rick, had talked about the probate process and how long that takes. Well, if you went to, for example, a title company where they weren't using attorneys, well, they're not going to be able to educate you on that probate process and why is it taking so long. And we certainly can do that here at Hobson Coutu and give you a good perspective on the closing process. So our home office is here on Jefferson Boulevard in Warwick. And as I said, I'm a stone's throw away from southeastern Massachusetts. I do closings in the Worcester area as well. Nowadays, us closing attorneys, we travel. We try to make things easy for the players that are involved, whether it's the buyers and sellers, the realtors, and frankly, everything's electronic, of course, and we can, I've done many closings at the Taunton Registry of Deeds, the Fall River Registry of Deeds, New Bedford Registry of Deeds, the Worcester Registry of Deeds. So we can really get to you at any place. So we certainly do travel. I mentioned earlier that I am a Rhode Islander, but I probably should let you know that my wife is from Swansea, so I consider myself to some extent from southeastern Massachusetts by marriage. So we can talk about who you know from Swansea and Rehoboth and Somerset and all those localities as well. So this is a team effort. I mean, it's pretty clear from speaking to everybody. We all add a little something to the puzzle, and I'm the closer, okay? If we're talking baseball, I'm Jonathan Papelbon. If we're talking a relay race, I'm the anchor. And at one point in my life, I did run the 4x1, and I was the anchor. So basically, at some point late in the process here, Alex will hand off that baton to my firm, and then we sort of take it from there. We get you to the finish line. That's our role. So attorneys wear many different hats. So there are 3 hats that an attorney can use during the closing process. You find, especially during these COVID days, that there are many seller's attorneys. In Massachusetts, it's very popular to have a seller's attorney. It always has been. What does the seller's attorney do? Well, they draft the purchase and sales agreement if you're in Massachusetts. They will collect payoff information. Eventually, they will draft some documents that are necessary at closing, like the deed. If you're here in Rhode Island, they would also draft the residency affidavits. You may, and we've seen a lot of this lately in these COVID times, the powers of attorney. So your seller's attorney would also be drafting powers of attorney. If we look at the closing attorney's job technically is to represent the bank. They're going to be given the loan documents from the lender. They're going to produce the closing disclosure. They're going to compile all this various information, bring everything together from all these different sources. Rick is going to get us the insurance binder. Alex is going to contribute. Then really the closing attorney runs the show. There's also the title attorney. The title attorney represents the buyer exclusively. They would review the purchase and sales agreement, perform the title search, and provide the title insurance. Sometimes we see all of these roles fulfilled. Sometimes, especially non-COVID here in Rhode Island, you'll see me acting as the bank attorney, the title attorney, but also preparing seller's documents. So these roles can be somewhat interchanged. If you go to my next slide, yeah. And most often you would see the closing attorney and title attorney really be the same person or the same firm, because the bank wants a smooth closing. The bank requires a clean title. And really the bank's interests and the buyer's interests are really going down the same path. Just to draw a quick distinction and not to get too much into the weeds, but if this was a commercial transaction and we were going to be purchasing a strip mall or an office building, you see a little bit more of, I don't want to say adversarial because we all kind of get along, but certainly the bank's attorney is going to advocate for the bank. The title attorney or the buyer's attorney is going to advocate for their client, and they may be going back and forths on the actual terms of the lending. You really don't get that in residential transactions. Alex offers the terms. They are what they are. You can't read our promissory note in our mortgage and take a red pen and start to delete things. You just can't do that in our residential mortgage world. You can to some extent on the commercial side. So that's where we most often see a title attorney and a closing attorney be very different people. But on the residential side, which all of you are interested in, I would imagine, you're going to see those roles combined. So who selects the attorney? Okay, who's a part of the selection process? Well, typically, you may know an attorney, you may know me, and you might say, hey, I want Arthur to do my closing and title work. But most often, you're going to lean on your realtor and your loan representative. They're most likely going to suggest an attorney for you to choose. But you typically have the right to choose your own attorney. So you might want to ask for a small list of those attorneys. Or again, very often I'll have friends or family that call me and want me to represent them at closings. But it is your pick. What do we do? Okay. So early on in the game, first quarter, we review the purchase and sales agreement. I know we have some people from Massachusetts online, and we also have some people from Rhode Island online. Rhode Islanders, for the most part, your realtor is going to draft a standard form purchase and sales agreement. Sometimes my realtor friends will say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith want you to review the purchase and sales agreement, and I will certainly, and I'm happy to do that for them. But those purchase and sales agreements are for the most part, pretty standard. In Massachusetts, you find a real distinction where the buyers and the seller's attorney kind of go back and forth on maybe some specific terms of the purchase and sales agreement. But at this stage of the game, and it's somewhat of a limited role, we come on the scene to make sure your rights are protected. And I can say, and I say this whether you're in Massachusetts or you're in Rhode Island, the most important thing about that purchase and sales agreement is to remember your dates, your mortgage contingency and your inspection contingency. Sounds quirky, but the purchase and sales agreement is your friend as a buyer, as long as you remember these dates when you need an extension. Where we get into trouble is, oh, yeah, we let the mortgage contingency slip, or we didn't get our inspection done in time. That's where you really run into a problem. Other than that, again, the purchase and sales agreement is typically your friend. I will tell you, I recently had a seller who had a suitable home amendment or attachment. So essentially the seller was selling their house subject to them finding a suitable home. Well, I think Christina can tell you in this market, it's very difficult to find a suitable home. So they kept extending that purchase and sales agreement date. The one thing they forgot to extend was the suitable housing addendum, and it lapsed. And the buyer said, I am buying this house. And my poor seller said, well, I didn't find a new house yet. And they said, too bad, the contingency lapsed. You need to sell your house to me this month. And I went back and forth with the buyer's attorney, and really our hands were tied. So we had to come up with a creative solution. I'll tell you, in the end, it all worked out for her. She found a very nice house, and the seller allowed her to stay in the house for a few months to continue her search. So it all worked out for her in the end. But dates, dates, dates. You got to remember those dates in order to take advantage of the contingencies. What do we do throughout the game? Well, at the very beginning, I might review that purchase and sales agreement. Then I'm not quite heard from for a little bit. We're working behind the scenes with the realtors, the mortgage people, the insurance people, the listing agent, the buyer's agent. We're trying to pull in all this different information and get everyone on the same page. So we may not be calling you, but that's what we're doing during those several weeks between the purchase and sales agreement and the actual closing date. To get you over the line, okay? I'm no Tom Brady, but you know, I am a TB12 fan, so I had to put his picture up there. So we're going to do the title examination. Again, we're going to gather information for payoffs, for municipal adjustments, things like taxes, fire district taxes. We're also going to start to solve problems. Certain things come up in the title examination. We may have found a mortgage that had been paid off, but there's a missing discharge. Well, we're going to be working with the seller's attorney there and try to rectify that problem. So we're problem solvers during this time. As I mentioned earlier, we may also be working with powers of attorney. We may have sellers that have moved out of state. So now we're trying to coordinate documents with them, making sure they have them, can sign them, get them back to their attorney. We're reviewing documents, and of course, we're conducting the closing itself. I did tell you we're at the closing table. Probably one of the biggest comments that I get from my buyers is, I've already signed this. Haven't I already signed this? It'd be like the fourth time they've signed the application. So I know we talked about your hand hurting and getting tired of signing documents, but many of the documents that you're going to sign at the closing table, Alex has already presented to you. I would say 75% of the documents. I am getting paid, so I'm still explaining these documents to you. But at that point, it's a little ho hum when my buyers are saying, I've already looked at this. I've already signed this 3 times. There is two very important documents that I wanted to bring to your attention. One is, of course, the promissory note, and I'll explain to you at that time. That is your personal promise to pay back the bank. You are, of course, secured by the collateral of the home, but in the event that you're foreclosed on and the sale through the foreclosure does not satisfy the debt, it is a personal responsibility. You're responsible for paying that debt back to the bank, just like you're responsible for your credit card payment, your car loan. The other document that's of great importance here is the mortgage document. It is the security instrument, and typically it's fairly long. And I'll tell you right now, it is a standard document. If you want to sit here and read the whole mortgage, be my pleasure. But basically, again, we can't change anything in the mortgage. It is describing the relationship you now have with the bank. It covers all kinds of contingencies. The fact that you're not supposed to store hazardous waste on the property, the fact that you have to keep the place fully insured, taxes being paid, what happens if the government comes along and condemns a portion of the property. It covers just about everything that can happen to the property. And the biggest thing that it covers is what happens if you don't pay, okay? If you don't pay, you can't stay. They take it away. Okay, that's the only Dr. Seuss you're going to get out of me. But that's a really easy way to explain it. Okay, we record the mortgage after the deed. It lets the world know that you owe Movement Mortgage a particular amount of money. You fail to pay it, they're going to go ahead and foreclose on the property. After the closing, we're going to rush out there and we're going to record the transaction. And then while you're going into your house and you're popping champagne, and I don't know if we still carry our wives over the threshold, but you may be doing that. I'm going to be at my desk dispersing the file. I'm going to be cutting the checks to all the players, the real estate commission, the bank, bank payoffs, municipal payoffs. I might even be paying Mario for his home inspection. I'm certainly writing a check to Rick Lima's office for the homeowner's insurance. I'm up to my ears in numbers even after you've left. So I like to tell stories because, I mean, this law, like I said, can get a little boring. So I'm going to tell you the story of the New Hampshire case. And this happened just to me last week. And the question was, do I need an attorney? A very good friend of mine's brother contacted me and he said, hey, I'm finally ready to buy that house. Excellent. Okay. And I said, what town are you buying in? And he said, I'm buying in New Hampshire. I said, well, I'm not licensed to practice in New Hampshire. He said, well, can't you represent me? I said, no. First of all, it would be illegal for me to represent you, right? And secondly, each state, whether it's Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, you'd be surprised on the difference between the conveyancing laws in each of the New England states. So I said, I wouldn't do you any justice if I represented you, which I can't do anyway. You need a New Hampshire attorney to conduct the transaction. So I said, but I'll do you a favor. You're a good friend. When you get the documents, I'm happy to explain them to you. And if you want to come to my office, I can witness them. I can notarize them, certainly explain them. So he sent me the documents. And within these documents was a waiver of the title examination. And I mean, for a real estate attorney, that's a cardinal sin. To think that anybody would waive a title examination. Now, I probably should tell you he's buying this cash. So if we had Alex involved, Alex would never let you cannot waive a title examination. But he waived it, and I said, well, why would you want to do that? And he said, well, a friend of mine at work that I sit next to, he went on the registry of deeds up in New Hampshire, and he typed in the seller's name and everything looked clear. So I guess I'm all set. Why should I pay the attorney $300 for that? And I said, okay, well, this is really what you should do. You should get a suitcase and put $130,000 in cash in that suitcase. Then go up to New Hampshire, knock on the door. The guy that greets you or the woman that greets you, have them sign like a little piece of paper giving you the property, and you just hand him the $130,000 in cash. And he said, are you being sarcastic? I said, well, that's essentially what you're doing. You're walking up to a door, you're listening to the seller, you're listening to the realtor, and you're just handing over your life savings to save $300. So just when you think you've heard it all. But in any event, coming towards the end of my little presentation here, the other thing, and this is a very popular item people like to discuss, I know both Christina and Alex wanted me to mention it, it's title insurance. And again, this sounds like a very boring subject, but the bank is going to require you to purchase a lender's policy of title insurance. So if there is a problem with the title, and essentially the home is lost through a lawsuit, the bank is going to recover their loan amount. At the same time, you can get a simultaneous issue policy, and 99% of all buyers that have come before me in 20 years have opted for an owner's policy of title insurance. Technically, it's optional, but it's really a no-brainer. It's a one-time fee. And I chuckle just a little bit because we pay auto insurance, thousands of dollars in auto insurance every single year. And many of us don't get in an auto accident. We go a lifetime of paying homeowners insurance or life insurance. And regarding the homeowners insurance, I mean, I loved Rick's presentation, but knock on wood, I haven't had to file a homeowners insurance claim, and I've been in my house for 20 years. So where did those thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars go? Well, they went to protect my assets. They went to give us peace of mind that, God forbid something happens while we're driving, God forbid something happens, our house burns down, we have that security. And again, we pay thousands and thousands, but yet when we're talking about our life's biggest purchase, our biggest investment, some of us putting down tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and yet that title insurance premium for the owner's policy is like $500 or $600. And people say, well, I'd like to cut the corner here. And I think to myself, this is a one-time charge. We're paying all this money. Wouldn't you want the security of knowing that your asset is protected? And I've listed some things here. What does title insurance protect you from? Well, false impersonations, forgeries on deeds, problems in the past with wills or heirs, recording issues, deeds by minors, situations where people don't disclose that they're married when they're selling property, and wives or spouses have a spousal interest in property. So, I mean, it seems kind of silly, and you may look at that and you say, well, hey, Russo, what's a recording problem? I mean, you did the title examination, right? You've been doing this all your life. So, I mean, I trust you. I'm sure everything is fine. Well, I'm going to give you an example. Recently, my client purchased property in East Greenwich, and he's an investor, and he bought the property at foreclosure. And I ran the title to the property, and the foreclosure was all in good order. We closed on the property. A few weeks later, my client received a letter from an attorney saying, by the way, I filed a Superior Court lawsuit regarding this property and a previous foreclosure that was attempted. My client is looking for money damages, and I've recorded a lis pendens on this property. And a lis pendens is a notice from the Superior Court that this property is involved in a lawsuit. Now, if you were listening to the beginning of my story, you would have heard me say that my client was an investor. So my client wanted to buy this property, fix it up, and resell it or flip it. Now he has knowledge that there is a lawsuit that's going to prevent him from doing that. So he calls me and he says, Arthur, how could you have missed this? And this is like a closing attorney's worst nightmare. So I go online and I say, it's not there. The lien isn't there. Well, as luck would have it, I suppose, the attorney that filed the lawsuit didn't record the lien properly. It was recorded not under the prior owner's name, which is what we researched, but it was filed against the bank. I would have never found that lien. So I guess we could ignore it. Well, we can't ignore it because now my client has actual notice of the lawsuit. Thankfully, my client got an owner's policy of title insurance. So I contacted the title insurance company. I provided them with the documentation and we filed a claim. And of course, they said, Russo, you didn't do anything wrong, which is comforting. And last week, I just received a letter from the title insurance company saying they've hired an attorney out of Boston. the attorney is going to enter his appearance down in Kent County here in Rhode Island, and that attorney is going to get that lien removed. So it's taken some time. Luckily, my client had a lot of work to do on the house, but that lien will eventually be removed. But had he not purchased that title insurance for a couple of $100 from us here at the closing, he would have had to have hired his own litigator, and I would imagine it would not be cheap. And that litigator would have to go to court on his behalf to get that lien released. And there's another funny one here that says, where was it? Well, Christina, you move the documents signed by minors. What is that? No one would ever have a kid sign an important document. Well, this year I dealt with a problem where a minor had signed a deed. And this minor had signed this deed back in 1968. My client, unfortunately, did not do the closing through my office when he purchased the property in the 90s, and he did not get title insurance for this particular lot. So we actually had to find this minor, and don't ask me how we did this, but we went ahead and found this now older gentleman in, of all places, Canada. So we had to convince this 60-something or 50-something-year-old fella in Canada, hey, do you remember that deed you signed back in 1968 when you were 16 or 17 years old? Can you sign a new deed for us? And of course, that person held out the hand and wanted a little cash to do that. But eventually, my client did provide him with $500 or $300 or something. And the person signed the deed and we got it back. But that was preventing my client from refinancing property. And it took months to do, like 5 or 6 months by the time we tracked this fella down. So I know these things seem, that'll never happen to me, but they do pop up. There are problems with heirs. There are problems with missing discharges and things that are recorded improperly. So please don't give Alex a hard time when he suggests, gee, you probably should get yourself an owner's policy of title insurance. It is just a few $100s. And like I said, no offense to Rick, but we pay thousands of dollars for auto insurance and homeowners insurance, and we think nothing of it. So it's very important. I would never suggest anyone purchase a home without getting a title insurance policy. Again, it's calculated on the amount of the purchase price, and it's a one-time purchase. So.
Well, thank you so much, Arthur. We appreciate it. Again, Arthur and his crew handling closings. I actually will be in his office tomorrow with some clients doing a closing for their property and their purchase. So he's great, and the whole team as well, just the communication, the care, everything that they put into the clients, into the buyers throughout the process and beyond. As he said multiple times in the conversation, clients coming back to him after the fact on different scenarios. We're always there for that, and that's why I love this crew. So thank you again, Arthur. We are going to very quickly get to some questions here. So I'm going to shout them out directly to some folks so that they can answer here. First and foremost, I'm going to go to Mario. Again, is it safe to waive the inspection when moving into a condo complex where most of the general maintenance is done by the association? Does a home inspection still look at the foundation, roof, etc. in these cases? So Mario, if you can hop in and give your insight to that.
So my first inspection this morning was actually a condo inspection. It was on one of the converted mill buildings. And I was actually greeted by the maintenance guy while I got there. And we got all the way up on that 5th story roof, which was one of the higher ones I've ever been on. But on top of that roof was the AC condenser for that unit. And so if I hadn't gotten up there and taken a look at that, we wouldn't have known that they had a 30-year-old AC condenser that was in need of some work. Typically with condo units, they operate on a studs in approach. So basically, for the most part, the buyer is responsible for everything studs in. So anything inside your unit is your responsibility. There are a few exceptions for that, like such as the AC condensers, which are almost always outside. There are a few times when they're built into walls and things like that, but for the most part, those are located on the exterior. But the same thing on that one inspection this morning, they had an old electrical stackable washer and dryer in the unit, and the seller had decided to change that out to one of those 2-in-1 combo washer dryer units. So that no longer runs on 220 electric, and we've figured out how they were using that. It wasn't plugged in at the time because they had to take that device and plug it in on an extension cord and run the power to the other room because it wasn't a compatible unit with the setup that they had already had in the unit. So on condos, they are a little bit of an easier inspection. We do take a look at the exterior. We do take a look at the roofing. Those things, if there are major defects with those components, those are typically under the umbrella of the association for those repairs. But there is still a lot to go through on an interior of a condo.
Absolutely. I'll just hop in just to add on to that as well. You want to check out what's going on in the condo docs and how they deal with different covered items. So for instance, if a roof has to be fixed in the complex, how is that fixed? Do they have a reserve fund that they're going to be utilizing, tapping into to get in that? Is it covered in your condo dues? Or are they going to be giving special assessments out to each of the members to cover that cost? So it is important in those situations, if you were to be receiving a special assessment for something like a roof, that you're preparing yourself for that, right? So it's not necessarily built into your monthly dues, but it's going to be on top of those monthly dues, and they're going to hit every one of the condo members for that. So if Mario identifies, hey, this roof is failing, then you know in your mind, okay, they've told us that that's going to be a special assessment for everybody. Now you can start preparing for those things, or potentially walk away from the deal if you're not interested in something like that. So those exterior things that are covered can still affect you, right? If a roof starts leaking and it drains into your house, well, now, you might have to be putting in some claims with Rick because something got wet in your interior that you are responsible for. So it really does come into play even with those condo situations.
Yeah,
Literally got a call about that today. Same scenario. Exactly.
Yeah, one thing to add on that is you want to figure out where you are in that condo building too. Because the one I did today, they specifically wanted me to look at the roof because the unit 3 doors down was getting water coming in from the roof. So they had been actually battling that for 7 months because they couldn't figure out where along the seams in the roof that the water was coming in. They finally figured it out. But last week I did one as well where it was on the bottom floor. And the realtor told me, oh, on these condos, I hate having the bottom floor. I like to have the top floor because if the guy above you, if their hot water tank goes, where does that water all go? So depends on where you got to kind of factor those things in. Just keep in mind on a lot of the condos, when did they turn those big buildings into condos? Because if it was around 20, 25 years ago, that's basically how old all of your components are inside the building. And that's when things start to need to be updated, things like that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mario, for that detail. On the realtor side of things, again, those condo docs are very, very important, something that your realtor should be getting for you very early on in the process. So you can have an understanding of all the rules and regulations within the association, what's covered, what's not, and all of that jazz. So thank you for that question. We got a question here that I think Alice can hop in on this one. This is the name of the game these days in COVID times and how we're trying to get things done. But why would an appraiser only do a drive-by appraisal instead of going inside the home? And how accurate is it doing just a drive-by appraisal? So Alex, can you hop in on this question?
Yeah, of course. So most of the drive-by appraisals that you're seeing right now, more often than not, they're for refinances. Occasionally they do come up for purchases though, and when they do come up, it's almost always the conventional loans, the ones I touched on earlier that are a little bit harder to qualify for, a little bit of a higher credit score requirement, and typically they have the lowest interest rate as well. But in order for usually in order good odds to get the drive-by appraisal, you need to have a large down payment. You need to have very good credit, very little debt. They are sufficient in determining value. They're not always as accurate as a full appraisal though, and it's never going to be as accurate as full appraisal because it's not going in the home. But if you have the option to get a drive-by appraisal for the home, rather, I should say, and you're planning on getting a home inspection, then that ability for doing a drive-by appraisal is definitely a good bargaining chip when it comes to offering on properties. And if you get into any bidding wars or anything like that, typically the seller is going to accept the offer that has a drive-by appraisal rather than the offer that has a full appraisal. And on top of that, absolute best case scenario, what we're seeing are complete appraisal waivers, where it's just a property inspection waiver. Basically, we put the address into our system and what we think the value is and contract prices. And sometimes Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, so again, just the conventional loans, sometimes they come back and say, okay, that's fine, you don't need an appraisal.
Wow. So that's one thing with the appraisals, in a crazy market sometimes, or as Alex talked about, a refinance situation. We've had scenarios where buyers their appraisal is coming in less than their purchase price, right? Or if it's a refinance situation, the appraisal is coming in less than the homeowner might expect it to come in at. So working with your realtor to touch base with that appraiser, and the same thing with your lender to touch base with the appraiser, to have some backup. I mean, when you're in the buying side of things, if the appraisal is coming in under your purchase price, there's a couple different scenarios. One is if we value the home more and they're not willing to move the needle, the appraiser is not willing to move the needle after presented with evidence supporting the actual purchase price, then that buyer can take out of pocket over and above what the lender is going to give them in a mortgage, because the lender is only going to give you what is appraised for. Okay, they're not going to give any more than that on a loan, but you can out of pocket the difference if you want. If you love the house that much and you really feel like it is valued at more than what the appraiser is giving you. The other thing that we can do is the seller could do a reduction on the purchase price with you. We would change the contracts, do an addendum to the contract purchase price. And then the last thing is that you could exit the contract. And again, at this situation, you would be getting your deposit back and all of that, because that is something that is built in with the contingencies and things. So those are the kind of scenarios. But again, it comes down to having good communication with your lender, right, Alex, and your realtor, and having people in your corner that are going to be looking out for your interests. So, not necessarily settling for, oh, well, here's the appraisal and this is what you got to deal with. Having your back and fighting for you and what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And I was going to say, just to touch on what you were saying, just because you say you have the option to do drive-by appraisal, it's not always the best option. If you don't get into a bidding war, or if it's something you're afraid of the house is even worth what the contract is, then you can get a full appraisal in order to ensure that. Because if a drive-by is just looking at it from the exterior, it doesn't know what's inside the house or anything like that as well. So it's like you said, it's always good to talk with the lender and talk with the real estate agent to see if a drive-by would even make sense for you in that specific situation.
Absolutely. So thank you, Alex. Appreciate that feedback. All right, so now we're going to go to, I get a question here from Mr. Rick Lima. What is the difference between a home warranty and home insurance? Rick, can you help us out with this one?
Yeah. So kind of like I said a little bit, maintenance, not really a covered commodity with insurance, wear and tear. So that, I think that really, I've been saying that I think the warranty kind of bridges the gap. You'd have to obviously read into the warranty with the fine print and stuff, but a lot of times I'll get a call like, oh, I wouldn't have bought the house if I knew about this. And I'm like, at the same time, the insurance company probably wouldn't have insured the house if they knew about it. So it's an unfortunate gap with coverage. You not knowing about something, and maybe something broke down that was older, but it wasn't caught. You know, if you have Mario, probably going to catch it, which is great. So I can't stress the home inspection enough because we deal with a lot of, you know, they might have been inspected, but it could have got missed. I mean, things do happen. I mean, I'm not perfect either. So stuff does happen. And you do want the proper coverage. So I feel like if you're going to really have a good, you know, circle of everything being okay for you, I think getting the inspection, maybe get a home warranty if you can. And then the insurance, I think that covers every gap you can have, because it really is something that's usually not covered, whether it's, you know, the appliances are covered and stuff like that for breakdown if they left everything in the house for you, or just things you didn't know could go wrong. Hey, we're going to give you this warranty for a year, kind of like you do for your car. That kind of stuff's not normally covered with insurance. So.
Yeah, so that's something that, you know, a lot of people, like I said, in this market right now, people are waiving home inspections and buying one-year home warranties because they're saying to themselves, oh, well, I'm going to waive the home inspection, I'm going to waive the home warranty. Well, those home warranties are also very specific as well on, you know, what they cover and how much they cover. So it's not, you know, you're not waving a magic wand and can swap out so easily one for the other, in my opinion, in terms of the home warranty and the home inspection itself. But as Rick said, the home warranty is going to cover different things. Obviously, it depends on the package that you're purchasing, right? You know, they've got the base model, they've got the middle of the road, and they got the luxury package. And it depends on the company, but for the most part, they're covering, you know, some appliances, things like that in the home. So you can pick and choose there. And those might not be items that your home insurance necessarily is going to cover, because if they break down, well, it wasn't because there was a fire or there was, you know, a bad storm or something like that. It was just because the thing is too old and it broke down. So that's kind of the difference there, where the home warranty would cover those things. Specifically, if you get a home warranty for those things, again, make sure you read the fine print, and your home insurance is going to cover you for disasters and things like that. So,
and you'll see the home insurance might cover you. You might have had an old hot water tank and it maybe should have been replaced. It was past its age. The insurance will cover the water damage resulting from it, no matter how old it is. But they might not always replace the actual hot water tank because it should have been replaced. So that, you know, that's the gap I'm talking about, where you're kind of at the mercy of the insurance company, whether you think that's a good or bad thing. We'll leave that up to you guys. But so yeah,
absolutely.
You don't want to be at the mercy of anybody. So you want to make sure you're covered for stuff. So
definitely make sure you're covered. And as Mario said, even on new construction, okay. And then the other side of things, the world of flips, okay. So make sure you're covered. A lot of people, they're buying properties, they think they're a flip master, they're turning it over and, you know, putting, you know, nicer things that look nice, but they're not fixing underlying issues that are behind walls or under floors. And then you have big problems moving forward. So please do make sure that you try to get yourself covered there, no matter even if you're doing a new construction or anything else. Last one here that I will go to, I'm going to throw this one to Arthur. What if something happens on my final walkthrough before the closing? Arthur.
That's a good question.
We go into the final walkthrough and there are holes in the wall that weren't there before. Arthur, what are we doing at that closing table?
Well, you have a couple of different options. It depends what needs to be done, how much it's going to cost, and where we are on a rate lock situation. If there are holes in the walls, then it's going to have to be repaired. It's the seller's responsibility. That's why we do a final walkthrough. If for example, it sounds to me like from that question, maybe the movers incidentally damage the walls, and that does happen. Probably the best thing to do there is to escrow some funds on the seller's side. Try to get some kind of an estimate from a contractor. how much it would be to repair the holes in the walls or a broken window. And we're either, if they would give you a hard number, a hard invoice, we can actually put it down as a line item, Don Francesco, construction to repair the walls, and we'll just pay him at closing. We'll just pay that company to do those repairs. But many times we can't get a good quote like that so quickly. So we're going to have to, between the listing agent and the buyer's agent, come up with a number that everyone's comfortable with, a couple of $1,000s. Now, whatever not used for the repairs gets returned to the seller. If it's really extensive damage, something that happened that was really bad, we may have to postpone the closing. But of course, we'd want to check with Alex to make sure that we don't have any rate lock issues or anything of that nature. But I mean, I've had people do that final walkthrough and there was a flood. Sellers had moved out and it was cold weather, and all of a sudden, the basement's flooded. That might be something where we would push the closing for a couple of weeks to get a better handle on it. But certainly, the holes and incidental damage like that, then we're gonna be escrowing funds.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And this just kind of touches upon a hot topic for me that I actually just, came across this week is, can we do the final walkthrough the day before or the night before? And my response and my vote is no. My vote is to always go to the property on your way to the closing table. You want to see that property, how it is in the moment right before you are to officially become the owner of that property. Because if you go and view the property the afternoon before your closing, and then overnight something happens, there's a pipe bursts or something happens, and then you go to the closing table and you sign and you get your keys, and then you walk into your house and water is raining down on you, depends on, I'd like to think that people are going to be honest and good people on the other side of the table, but you just never know, unfortunately. So you want to make sure that you're taking a look at that property before you go to the closing table and actually own it officially. Like I said, my recommendation, always do that final walkthrough immediately prior to your closing and go into the closing table. Well, that is kind of covered it. We do have some more questions here, which I am going to do some answering, emailing directly to people, answering in the chat after the fact. We are running here 8:05, so we ran over a little bit here with the questions and everything, but I felt like it was a lot of great information from the panel. Thank you all for joining us. Arthur, Alex, Rick, Mario, thank you guys so much. Again, these guys are all great people to deal with through the process. We thank you guys for joining us, and I will also be putting everybody's name in a hat to draw for the winner of the closing package, which is up to $2,000 in rebates back to you on your next purchase, as you're using the services from all these great panelists. So thank you guys again for joining us, and best of luck with everything throughout your purchase process.
Right, everyone.
Everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Go get that house, baby. Go get that house.